Hello and welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. I'm your host Hal, and with me here today, Slice King. Introduce yourself.
Hello everybody, my name is Slice King. I am not part of the Shafrillis gang, but I am somebody who knows Hal.
Everybody knows who I am, dude, of course.
Yeah, exactly. You're the popular member from the Shafrillis gang.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's why it's called the Shafrillis Gang. I'm the most popular member.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'm the one with the 1 million subscriber channel, obviously.
Oh, yeah, obviously. We all know.
Yeah, of course. Well, anyway, dude, welcome to the show. We got a couple of movies to talk about that are not Kung Fu Panda related. Yeah, we're recording this the weekend that Kung Fu Panda 4 came out. I would have liked to have had the episode after Dune to be the Kung Fu Panda episode, but scheduling conflicts. But you know what? That's fine, because the Kung Fu Panda episode, it'll be out when it's out, and we like that. It'll be out when it's out.
Yeah, so I guess if you were looking forward to the Kung Fu Panda episode, well, you got it a week later.
Yeah, that's okay. We have a different talking animal movie to talk about first off. So let's get into that. Slice, you recommended a couple of movies, and the first one we're going to talk about is The Secret of NIMH. Yeah. This is
Hmm.
this is a movie I've seen a couple of times before. I have it on DVD, this MGM DVD, which we'll get into later on.
Right.
But yeah, let's start things off with, dude, what'd you think of The Secret of NIMH?
Well, first, I guess I want to talk about how I first got some exposure to it. I guess I'm gonna set the scene at least for like an old grandpa story. Or I guess in the fourth grade in particular, like on a cold October, my dad recommended me at least watching this movie, which I thought was kind of weird, mostly because he doesn't really watch animated stuff. So I watched it back then, like once, and I remember at least a lot of it, but it was, of course, a long time ago. I got reintroduced it back with Doug Walker in particular. He put this as one of his top 20 favorite movies of all time. And I was like, hey, I remember that. And then I decided to rewatch it. And honestly, for me, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. At least one of my favorite animated movies. I think you could tell based on my profile pic what it is, but this is one of those movies that honestly sticks out to me as an individual. So
I could see that. Yeah. This is one of those movies that I didn't grow up with Secret of NIMH. I wish I did. But I didn't discover it until I was like late teens, when I became infatuated with a certain reviewer that we've brought up several countless times on the show, and will continue to bring up several countless times on the show forever and ever.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm of course talking about the Angry Video Game Critic, when he reviewed Bebe's Kids. No. No, yeah. So obviously, for those who know good old Doug, he's often stated this as one of his favorite films of all time. And I have the past week or so after watching the movie, I have been watching a lot of his videos on Secret of NIMH, and I gotta say, like, these are the videos where I feel like, okay, this is the Doug that I first like grew up on, and essentially adopted this love for film. Like, this is the Doug I think of when I think of why I got into loving film, not the Doug who
Yeah.
created the wall video. So
Yeah.
it's one of those movies where I feel like, I don't love it on the same level he does, but I've definitely grown to appreciate it in a way that I don't think I would have had I not seen his analyses on the movie.
Right.
But even outside of him, like, just watching the movie on its own, it's really good. Like, it's Don Bluth. This is the second Don Bluth movie we're actually talking about on the podcast. Last year I had Chaos on. We talked about Land Before Time. And I'm just going to say, I think this is, from what I've seen, obviously I haven't seen every single Don Bluth movie, but I feel like this would probably be my favorite from him. like I like Land Before Time. Was not huge on American Tail. I know those are like his two other great films, and then we get into his later
Mhm.
stuff, which, well, we don't have to get into his later stuff because who would? um,
Oh, yeah,
but we have.
totally.
But I feel like Secret of Nim is the one I've definitely connected with the most out of the movies I've seen from him so far. I don't know. I mean, you said you love this film, so I assume it's one of your favorites from him.
Yeah, it's my favorite from his.
Mm-hmm.
I also really like some stuff like Anastasia. Well, I liked An American Tail, but it's been a while since I've watched it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's at least we're not talking about one of his '90s materials, or at least early '90s, like Rockadoodle or something like that.
Or Troll in
Ugh.
Central Park. That's the one I hear is like one of his worst. Which, again, I've seen the review of it. Wow, like this guy made Secret of Nim. Like you
Yeah,
really have to question it
yeah.
sometimes.
As someone who's seen A Troll in Central Park, it is honestly unbelievable he made that movie and The Secret of Nim.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's like going from Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather to Jack or something like that. You just can't believe it.
Yeah, sometimes directors will just make shit and you're just like, how? How are you the same person? But
Exactly.
I mean, it happens sometimes. So, um yeah, I guess one of the things I wanted to get right into with this movie, right off the bat, is the animation. Let's talk about it. Like,
Oh yeah, totally.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. Especially when you're comparing it to when it came out. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I like to compare this movie with The Rescuers because
Mm.
that was the recent rat movie. When
Yeah.
you compare it between that movie and this movie, it's night and day which one's better.
Oh yeah.
Since if you remember in The Rescuers, they didn't like fill out their eyelids in particular.
Mm.
And then when you go to this movie, it looks like a classic 2D Disney movie that Don Bluth wanted to go for, like a Sleeping Beauty or a Lady and the Tramp or something like that.
Yeah, very classical
That's
Disney.
yeah,
Yeah.
as opposed to what Disney was doing, where they were, of course, doing it to cut corners when it comes to their budget. So
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen Rescuers, but there, yeah, that like mid to late 70s, early 80s era is, I mean, it's often considered their dark age for good reason. Like a lot
yeah,
of a lot of movies from that time, well, not a lot of them because you do get the occasional like Winnie the Pooh or Fox and the Hound which have their fans, but
yeah,
you also get the Rescuers and infamously Black Cauldron, which I like Black Cauldron from what I remember, but I would not argue it as one of Disney's best. So
yeah,
you definitely get a sense that like, yeah, that was not like that's why Don Bluth left the studio. He's just like, come on, like these are not the movies you guys should be making. You can amp it up a little, and they're just like refusing. Like, well, we don't have the budget. He's like, well, fine, I'm gonna go make my own animated movies with blackjack and
yeah,
hookers, and we got The Secret of Nim, which, yeah, honestly, like, I think the thing that I've grown to appreciate with Secret of Nim is that, you know, on the surface, you could probably, like, I would assume a lot of, like, parents and grandparents back in the early 80s saw it and they're just like, oh, a Disney film, I could show my child. And it's just like, yeah, on the surface, it looks like one. But I feel like when you actually watch it and you, like, go beyond the surface, you start to get something you really would never see from a Disney film. Something
yeah,
that's not afraid to be dark and not just like visually dark or like, you know, occasionally a character dies or says a semi swear word, you know,
right,
like not actually dark, like pretending to be dark. Like
yeah,
no, this movie has balls on it. Like and it never holds your hand. But not so much that it's distracting, like it feels like it's compensating, like it's just like, oh, this ain't your grandparents' animated movie. It's like, no, it has a point to its dark edginess to it, you know?
right, yeah, totally,
With that said, it's not entirely dark. Like there are moments explicitly for the kiddies, like the character of
yeah.
Jeremy, played by Munchie himself, Dom DeLuise.
Or as sometimes I like to know him as the director from Blazing Saddle.
That is
So
true, yeah.
he's also a reoccurring person in Don Bluth movies. Like he was the cat from or the friendly cat from American Tail. He was
Mhm.
oh was he in All Dogs? I forgot his name, but he's the sidekick from for Burt Reynolds' dog. But anywho,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, Dom
I
DeLuise, the way I know him from actually is from the original Muppet movie because he's the agent who just so
yeah
happens to be rowing through the swamps where he finds Kermit. He's just like,
yeah
"Hey kid, haven't you ever been to the movies? Here, go audition for Orson Welles' movie studio or something like that." Uh
I've I've actually heard complaints, at least from some people, where they find Jeremy kind of annoying in the movie, which I get honestly, but
mhm.
I think he's a much needed levity at least for this movie, since if you didn't have him, you'd probably get something like Watership Down or Plague Dogs, which might be seen as too depressing. So I
Yeah.
think it's personally fine to have some sort of levity when it comes to this kind of movie. So
I was actually thinking about that while watching the movie. So I'm someone who I'm just gonna say it. I've never really been someone to complain about comedic side characters. You know, like characters like Jar Jar Binks or Gurgi in in their respective movies, or Ben in Treasure Planet. Like I understand why people don't like them, but coming from my perspective, I was never truly bothered by them to the extent that I saw some people would complain about them. And because like I was
yeah,
watching this and I'm like, is Jeremy considered one of those characters like a Jar Jar Binks or a Gurgi where like people think he clashes with the tone so much that it ruins the experience for them.
yeah,
Um but again, cuz like I'm not one to know I'm not one to really pick up on that because I've never been bothered by Jar Jar Binks or Gurgi. I don't particularly think they're the greatest characters ever, but they're not the reasons why I mainly don't connect with their respective movies. I've always found
um,
other aspects, even as a kid, there were other aspects that kind of bothered me about those movies.
hmm
So,
yeah.
uh,
I
so,
mean,
so I'm just wondering, like, what the general consensus on Jeremy is, because yeah, I never found him too distracting. Um, could he be a little much at times? Yes, I feel like that's intentional, and I do feel like because
yeah,
it is Dom DeLuise, a genuinely funny actor. Like, again, he was
yeah,
in Munchie. That's not a particularly great film, but honestly, if it wasn't Dom DeLuise voicing Munchie, man, like it would not be Munchie.
yeah. I guess I also want to talk about probably my favorite aspect of this movie, which is Mrs. Brisby as a character. This is one
Mm.
thing that Doug has pointed out,
Mhm.
at least for whenever he talks about this movie, his favorite aspect is Mrs. Brisby, and I personally agree with his consensus about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Especially in especially in the age that we live in nowadays, where there's these strong independent female characters, like Rey or Captain Marvel or their sort of stuff. The
Yeah.
people who are seen as like perfect and that kind of consensus. But one of the things that I honestly like about Miss Brisby is how afraid she is, at least in the movie, when you see her go through this sort of journey. Like at the beginning of during like the plow scene,
Mhm.
you see her essentially just hide, or at least cover and hide away while her aunt takes care of it. I think a scene like that is also very important to the movie because it kind of makes her journey more unbelievable, at least going from this widowed mother that was kind of a little bit cowardish, or as Gene Siskel said, a twerp, into somebody who saves the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, and exposes, of course, Brenner as a villain. So
Yeah, I you bring up a very good point with saying like, oh, we live in an age of like uh quote unquote better written female characters because the whole like
yeah,
female main character thing has always fascinated me because I'm told because I remember when I first started getting into film criticism and analysis, it was the mid 2010s when I really started becoming aware of that. And of course, that's when, we had movies like Force Awakens coming out. We had like all these
right,
other movies. And like yeah, there was like this idea that people were kind of like talking about online where they're just like, "Oh, finally, we finally have good female characters in movies." And I'm just like,
yeah,
"Finally? Like what do you mean finally? Like what happened the first
yeah,
100 years of film?" It's like and
exactly,
to be fair, yes, there is absolutely a conversation to be had about the lack of good written female characters back in the day. I understand that. But I also
Yeah.
feel like we're living in an age where it's not necessarily fixing a problem. Like it's just creating a brand new problem. Because yes, back in the day, the stereotype of a female character was that she was over emotional or like, this completely different creature. Like, yeah, there's
Right.
obviously misogyny and sexism behind that. But then you get to movies nowadays, or like in the 2010s and into nowadays, where it's like now women can't be over emotional, but they can't be emotional at all. They can only be like hardcore and strict and like, oh,
Yeah.
they're just so cool. They can't have any flaws. It's just like, okay, we've gone way too far in the other direction. What am I supposed to relate to this character with? Like, who is this
Yeah.
character? Who is this
Exactly.
character? Who is she
Yeah.
outside of woman? So anyway, my long-winded point is yes. So it's good to go back to this movie that came out in 1982, was marketed towards
Hmm.
children, and is
Yep.
animated and
Yep.
has a really compelling main character. I agree. Mrs. Brisby is a very compelling main character
Yeah.
because of her character. Like she has a character. She's meek, she's timid, but she's not like a coward. She is very much somebody who is passionate for the people that she loves. Like that's not a character flaw. That is a character. So you're absolutely right. Like
Yeah.
she is far more compelling than like basic insert any like modern female character you want that's in a terribly written modern blockbuster. You're absolutely right.
Exactly. Yeah, at least she's honestly also one of my favorite characters in general, just from
Mhm.
her growth and journey throughout the movie. So,
Yeah, it's
anyhow,
it's a nice growth. It's a nice journey to
yeah,
watch because you're actually rooting for her. You relate to her. You understand her. Like she's everything a main character should be. I agree.
yeah,
Um, I think, I guess to go a little off topic, but still within the idea of Mrs. Brisby,
yeah.
is that the thing I want to talk about is like the sound editing with her name. So
Oh yeah,
this is something that I remember reading up on IMDb years ago. Like I just look because I used to like frequent the IMDb pages of like movies I know, and I would find like the trivia section. I would like go through like the trivia section, and I remember finding the trivia on how they changed her name halfway through production. How like because like the book it's based
yeah.
off of the main character's name is Mrs. Frisbee, which sounds like that one toy that we all know what it is, the
Oh
frisbee.
yeah.
So
Hmm.
and I feel like I feel like stories change with this where it's like I think Whammo, the company that owns the frisbee, like actually did seek them out to be like, hey, don't do this, or the studio itself was like, we don't want a lawsuit. Like
I think it was
they made the
because of
decision. Okay.
the lawsuit thing, as opposed to Whammo going
Okay.
after them,
Yeah.
like that.
So they had to change it to Mrs. Brisby. And I actually did learn that they did re-record a lot of the lines. So not every instance where a character says Brisby is edited. It's actually them just naturally saying Brisby. But
Yeah.
I think one of the first utterances of the name Brisby from a different character is when Mr. Ages meets her like at the beginning and he goes, "Oh, you're Mrs. Brisby." Like you can tell. Like and maybe
Hmm.
it's just me and my editing brain. I can tell that. But in other times it feels so natural. Like I learned that John Carradine didn't return to re-record any of his lines, so they actually had to go in and edit it around. And I just think that's so cool that they did that. Not only did they do that, but they made it sound as natural as possible because had I not known that, I probably wouldn't have picked up on it. Um
Yeah.
and I feel like I really want to talk about that because like, you know, sound editing is important. And like
Oh
sometimes even though this is a movie with a movie budget, they didn't have the budget to bring actors back to re-record lines, so they had to do like
right.
some editing. And let me just say, I relate to that because as an editor for James, this is not to call out James as a lazy asshole. He's not. He will sometimes say a line and then he'll like say it again, but it's in a way where like it's kind of hard for me to differentiate different takes. So I have to go in
Right.
there and seriously splice it up to make it sound as naturally as possible. Nobody's pointed it out yet, and maybe that's because nobody's been looking for that. But if
Oh,
you listen to some of my segments, sometimes you can tell when I splice together two takes, and sometimes I amaze even myself. Not to toot my own horn, I feel like I do it
huh.
pretty damn well. Like there's some takes that I'll just splice together and it sounds so naturally, and I'm just like throw my fist in the air like, yes, I did it. Of course nobody cares, but you know, because
Yeah.
I've been doing this for so long, I just wanted to finally have an excuse to talk about that, because that is something I've been doing for years. So
Yeah.
oh, but yeah, no, I
Understandable.
love how this movie pulled that off. I think it's a real feat in sound editing for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it doesn't get mentioned that often, but it's nice to at least bring some mention here. So,
Well, it's interesting because, not to go a little into the DVD, but I have this like little booklet the movie comes with that has like little facts about like the animation process, and it actually does go into the fact that they had to re-record the or they had to like edit around the lines. Um yeah, it says like a section is called like no mix-ups in the mix down, and it's like all the different voices, music, and sound effects are blended together in just the right measure and added to the film. But in The Secret of Nim, there is a teaspoon of trouble in the recipe when the heroine's name was changed at the last minute. Originally, Timmy's courageous mother was to be called Mrs. Frisbee, but was later changed to Brisby and re-recorded. Every time you hear it, the name Brisby in the movie, it was once Frisbee. So
right.
this is, and this, when is this DVD from? Like 1998, 99, 2000. Like it's a late 90s, early 2000s DVD. So like it's pretty early on, but like the fact that they were still talking about it then, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, totally.
So I feel like I've been going on. You talk about something.
You're good. Uh, I guess I also want to talk about the music in particular.
Mm.
Barry Goldsmith's score. I really like it
Oh,
overall.
me too. It's really good.
Yeah. I guess also a fun little fact, the song that plays at the end was written by Paul Williams, who you obviously would know from the Muppet movie soundtrack and the Muppet Christmas Carol. So,
That's right. Yeah, Paul Williams. He's done stuff for the Muppets. He was that guy in Baby Driver. He was the guy who sold them the weapons, and he was treating like all the weapons as like, meats, cuts of meat, because he was called like the butcher or something like that. That's Paul
yeah.
Williams. Yeah.
Hmm, interesting.
So, but yeah. Oh God, the Jerry Goldsmith score. Like, holy moly! Which it's funny that this movie has a Jerry Goldsmith score, because the second movie we're talking about also has a Jerry Goldsmith score. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get there when we get there.
But yeah, no, I agree. Like, I think it's such a grand orchestral score, like at times, and like it knows when to just like kind of pull back and let the silent scenes be silent.
Yeah.
Like it's masterfully like used in the movie for sure.
Yeah. I think the two moments that I always remember in particular is the opening.
Mm.
At least, when the title card's coming out.
Yeah.
It kind of presents it as this sort of big grand event, especially with the title card, which has always stood out to me whenever I watch this movie because of how cool it is.
Yeah, it's
I
a
know that they were taking Yeah, I know they were taking an editing technique from a original movie called The Thing, so they thought, "Oh, that's a cool idea. Let's do it for our title sequence." So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, yeah, because it's like it also kind of reminds me of the way that the old like Fleischer Superman cartoons start off, where you have like this like little spark and it kind of just explodes, and then you like it reveals like
Right.
Superman. That's what it kind of reminded me of. But yeah, and then I have seen the Doug video where like where the original animator goes into like how they were inspired by. He says The Thing, but like I'm trying to think, because The Thing that everybody knows came out in 1982, same year as this, but The Thing they showed was like in black and white, so which is the movie is called The Thing from Another Planet. I think they use the same.
Right.
I think it's the same exact effect, because I think both The Thing from Another Planet and The Thing 1982 use the exact same effect on their titles, like intentionally
Yeah.
so. Yeah,
Yeah, I would think so.
yeah. But
I guess the other moment I also like in the score is, of course, when Mrs. Brisby gets the medallion, and of course you
ooh.
see the lights go over, and then you hear the choir essentially go. I don't want to sing it, but
No, but I mean, if it's a choir, it's like grand and epic. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It feels grand and much more ethereal in a way. So
Ethereal is a very good word to use. Yeah, yeah, that
yeah,
amulet, man. I've pretty much adopted slash stole what Nostalgia Critic has always said about that. How like it's more so the unknown. And
yeah,
I really like that because yeah, I don't know what it is. It just kind of shows up, but I feel like that is kind of the point. Like, the whole
yeah,
like
exactly.
you don't know what it is, but it's still like putting your faith in it and it ends up working out. Um
Right.
Not necessarily saying like, oh, put all your faith in the unknown, but like to just, understand that sometimes what you don't know can help you, like what you don't know.
Yeah. I guess to add on to that, I also like how they don't explain what the amulet does in
Sure.
general, just
Yeah.
to keep it much more of a unknown mystery of what it is, just to also make it feel much more sacred in a way. So
I feel like, yeah, if it went into details, you'd get bored immediately because that is something that's kind of troubling when it comes to such original films. Like
yeah,
there's so much lore you need to keep track of. Whereas I feel like this one knows what it wants to show. It knows what it wants to show as exposition. That's why it explains where the rats came from. They came
yeah,
from Nim and like what happened to them. Yeah. I love the scenes. I guess we can get into like actually explaining like what Nim is and like how the rats came from Nim. I really
right,
loved the scene of Nicodemus explaining how he all of a sudden understands what like the little description on the door says, how it says like to open lift latch, and he's like, I understood what that meant. And that really
yeah,
fucked with me kind of because I'm thinking like, oh, like I remember because I remember being a kid and learning to read and write, not physically actually remembering how to learn and read and write, but I do remember it being a process. Like I was
mm-hmm,
I was a kid. One day, like I just started to understand things, but it wasn't just like a one day. It was like a process. Whereas like here, he's describing it as like immediate, and it's just like, oh, that just really messes with me. Like, how do you just understand a concept like right away? Like
yeah,
that messes with me because like as a person, like I don't know, every skill I've ever like learned, I've learned over time. I have never been able to just like instantly pick something up and know exactly what to do with that. I feel like that would just fuck with my head like insanely. Like that just oh, it's kind of scary
yeah.
when I think about it. Which I
I
guess
guess it also could be.
it's kind of
I
hard to
guess it also could be.
explain.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I guess it also could be the drugs from the,
Mhm.
like, or it could be the drugs from the experiment giving them such a high intelligent IQ. So
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is like that I really like about this movie is that it's about these rats gaining intelligence in a way that they do kind of take on the burden of man where like they're
yeah,
self-conscious, they have intelligence, and I like how it's not it's done in a way where it's not to like belittle man. Like how like a lot of these
right.
environmental movies will just be like, oh, man bad, and it's just like, ah, d- animals good,
Bad things
man bad. um
happen. You're making me think of the nostalgic man sort of thing.
yeah, yes, man. Here's the Satan's taint, and yeah, yeah. But what I like about this movie is it's not man bad. You obviously feel the presence of man as like kind of a villainous, not really villainous, antagonistic force.
Yeah,
Because like the farmer is the farmer who's gonna like take the tractor and like take the field to like then grow crops, but that's not malicious intent. That's he's literally just doing it
yeah,
because it's his job, and he doesn't hate
exactly.
the animals necessarily. He sees them as vermin. He doesn't really see them as like that much a threat. He's just like, they're just annoying, like I just want to get rid of them. He doesn't care about them.
Yeah,
um
exactly.
I don't know, the whole rats taking on the intelligence of man reminds me of Planet of the Apes, the original Planet of the Apes,
Mm.
because that was a movie that had that like sense of like, oh, man's ego is what ultimately destroyed them, blah blah blah. But what I liked about that movie is that it still showed the apes, as intelligent as they were still falling for the same traps of, egotism that comes from self-consciousness and intelligence.
Right.
But it wasn't trying to be so blatant about it. It was actually extremely subtle. It was handled beautifully. Like for a movie made in 1968, like The Planet of the Apes. Oh God, that's an episode for another day. But I just want to say I was
Mm.
thoroughly impressed with how that movie tackled that. And I feel like this is a little more interesting because it's not about the humans. It's about the rats. Like it knows
Yeah.
what it's about in that sense.
Right.
So it never gets too distracted by anything else. Like it knows to keep the focus on the rats, but deep down there is that like sense of like relating to them because they have achieved intelligence, and you're just like, and just seeing all these characters, these rat characters, like come to grips with who they are, like what they want to achieve with their newfound intelligence. I love how was it Justin at one point was just like, we've realized morality, like we've realized, it's wrong to steal electricity from the farmer. you know they know the farmer does not respect them because he just sees them as rats, but they still understand that morally they shouldn't be stealing electricity from this guy that they know hates them. They just know, like, morally speaking, it's still not right whether we get along or not.
Yeah.
A children's film in 1982 is tackling these themes. Isn't that
And
fucking insane?
and somehow it's G-rated still.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even for 1980s G rating, like I feel like that's the thing though, is like whenever we think about like dark 80s children's fantasy movies, you think of The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, like Return to Oz and stuff like that, like Who Framed Roger
Yeah.
Rabbit, like just to name a few, like, but the kinds of movies I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I feel like this is still different from those because when I think The Dark Crystal, obviously my favorite film of all time, what I
Mhm.
like about that movie is not so much like I didn't really adopt the themes as like my favorite part of that film right away. Like that's something I kind of learned to appreciate over time. But I feel like that's something I get mostly out of it. I would not blame anybody who watches the movie would not get the same themes out of it that I did. Whereas I feel like Secret of Nim, like I feel like that is what makes it so dark. It's not just the visuals and like the scary imagery. Like it is like these heavy, heavy themes to be like asking for a child to comprehend. No way are they going to comprehend this stuff. But it's still
No
delivered
way.
in a way that I feel like they may not they may not like get at first, but eventually they might. That's the thing is
Mhm.
like it's tackling these themes in a way that you're not going to get it at first, but maybe down the line you'll be like, "Oh, I want to watch that again." And then you'll start to pick up on that stuff. That is
Yeah.
something I feel like a lot of films don't understand, is that they want to get all of their deep themes, their deep like philosophical metaphors and messages like out there right away so you can pick up on them immediately. So then you can just praise the film right away and just be like, "Yeah, this is great." But then
Ugh.
ironically, by putting them all at the forefront, there's nothing for you to chew on later on down the line. Like it's just sort of there and you're just like, all right, now I never have to see this again, which is really bad for a film that you want to revisit. Like,
Yeah.
you just kind of forget about it then. It's like, well, what was the point? Whereas I feel like with Secret of Nim, it kind of sneaks up on you over time. You're able to chew on it for
Yeah.
years and years. And Secret of Nim will never go out of fashion. People will be discussing this film for years because there's so much to it.
Ironically, I don't think this film is, well, at least for animation fans, it's pretty well known, but I don't think it's as well known as enough. More because I see like on Letterbox, it's not like above 100K viewers or something like that.
Hmm.
And I still feel like it's kind of underground in a way.
In a way.
Maybe not to animation fans, but definitely like a general moviegoer. They're not going to be like, oh, remember the great animated films like Lion King or Spirited Away? And
Mm.
sometimes maybe Secret of Nim is mentioned.
Yeah.
And I guess I also want to bounce off of the points of your themes. I guess one of the things that also I miss when it comes to movies nowadays, especially in like a kids film, is having themes that are much more subtle, and I guess something that would pick up upon as like when you're a kid. That's something that's not spelled out. I
Hmm.
think one of the biggest examples that I usually point to is in Frozen. I remember Olaf saying, "Oh, so it's love. That is, oh, it's sisterly love. That's it." And I'm like, dude, kids are not that stupid.
Yeah.
Kids can pick up on subtle details. They can't really, or they don't have to have anything be blatantly spelled out for you in general.
Hmm.
So
I feel like some people do, but I feel like when you cater to those people, you then abandon other people. Whereas, like, I feel
yeah,
like you gotta be confident that your audience will pick it up, but also you shouldn't be afraid of your audience interpreting something a different way. You know,
yeah,
as I've said countless times on this show with various different movies that I love, my favorite films are the ones that I can interpret, like that I can get something out of. And I don't necessarily need straight up answers for me to like be satisfied with. Like, The Shining,
hmm,
Pink Floyd's The Wall, Blade Runner. Those are movies that are not easy to understand the first time around, nor will you understand the 37th time around. Like, you're always going to be questioning certain things, and I feel like that's what makes a much more interesting, fascinating, and all the more satisfying movie to me, is that I can
right.
interpret it. It's my vision because it's a movie that I love. So yeah,
Hmm.
no, I agree that, and I get it, not everybody wants things to be vague and broad, like, they want answers, which is
Yeah,
why we should appreciate the movies that actually do treat you as intelligent, you know
right.
so there's just a lot of death in this movie, that's for sure.
Oh yeah,
Like the villain Jenner, like, holy shit. Well, that's the thing, is like
yeah,
Jenner is we don't often, like you were saying with like, oh, Secret of Nim is not seen as like up there as like Lion King or Spirited Away when it comes to great animated films. Like Jenner is not
yeah.
often cited as like a great animated villain, which
Oh yeah,
I
that's
guess I
true.
kind of understand. Like Jenner is not Scar or Ursula or Hades from Hercules. Like, he's not,
Yeah,
he is, you definitely see the design and you think villain, and you hear the voice performance and you think villain. And I do think he's an interesting layered villain, because yes, he's obviously the antagonistic force, but I wouldn't say he is acting out of selfish reasons, but you at least understand why he's doing the things
yeah,
that he does. But I guess, yeah, he's not as like memorable as someone like Scar or Ursula, but I still feel like he works for the movie.
yeah, for sure.
Um,
Especially being a force for being the fear of the unknown, especially with
yeah,
them wanting to get rid of human electricity into the Thorn Valley. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, it's a position you understand. You may not agree with, but you understand, and I really appreciate that. Like, he's undoubtedly the villain, but you at least
yeah,
understand where he's coming from. You can view him as like a irredeemable asshole villain, but you could also interpret him as like, well, he's a jerk, but I understand why he thinks this way, Like, if you can at
hmm,
least do that, I feel like you can make a really good villain. Just, you don't have to make them sympathetic. You just have to make them understandable, you know.
yeah,
We don't need a Cruella movie or a Maleficent movie. We just need to understand why they are. And guess what? The original movies, we understand why they're evil. We don't need, it's conversation that's
yeah,
already been said.
hmm,
um, I will say the animation on Jenner is really good. I think he's very expressive for what he is. Like, again, I don't consider him on the same level as Scar or Ursula, but for what he is, he's really good.
yeah, and
Um,
also gets a pretty cool violent death. So
yeah. Oh, dude, it's just the guy throws the knife and stabs him in the back. He's just like, "Ah!" and falls over. Ugh.
probably scarred many children back then, but who cares?
Yeah. Who cares? um, I guess one of the last things I wanted to mention, this is not a serious thing. I wanted to say, like, the Great Owl is played by John Carradine, father of David Carradine. I John Carradine was like a very famous actor back in the old days of like the 30s and the 40s. Um, and he obviously had many children who they themselves became famous actors. I just every time I hear the name Carradine, I think of his son David Carradine, who you people will know him as Bill in the Kill Bill movies. Um,
Uh,
but he's the guy who died of autoerotic asphyxiation, and because me and William are such fans of Red Letter Media, and every time they watch a movie that has David Carradine in it, they can't help but bring up David Carradine autoerotic asphyxiation jokes. So I just have to mention that because I'm a sicko.
yeah, I get that. I
So
guess one more thing I would like to mention. This is also not a serious thing, but the actor, I think his name is Arthur Jacoby, who played Mr. Ages. He's the only thing that returned into that shitty sequel. You
really,
know, the sequel. Yeah, he's like the only voice actor. Oh wait, and I guess Dom DeLuise, just those two in
Mhm.
particular.
Is it Arthur Mallet or
It
yeah,
could be Arthur Mallet. I
yeah,
remember
because
his first name was Arthur. So.
yeah, because I think when you said Jacoby and I was thinking Derek Jacoby, who's the guy who
Oh yeah,
played
yeah, yeah,
Nicodemus.
yeah, Arthur Mallet.
But
You're
yeah,
right.
Arthur Mallet. Okay, yes, and Dom DeLuise. Yeah, in the sequel, I did not watch. I just watched the Nostalgia Critic review of it because
I have.
I thought about watching the sequel, but I was like, we're not going to
I've.
talk about it in any real way this episode, so why bother? Just watch the
I mean,
Nostalgia Critic
I've
review.
seen the sequel.
Yeah.
Honestly, the only thing you really need to get out of it is within the first minute, they pretty much lie about the first movie,
Yeah.
where Nicodemus says that a prophecy foretold that his son Timmy will be the hero or some shit like that. I don't know. It's been a while, and I don't care about rewatching that piece of dog shit.
It's one of those Nostalgia Critic videos where he just like rips it to shreds that people didn't try to pull revisionist history on. You know how like sometimes that happens, like Doug will just like rip a movie to shreds and then years later people will be like, "Oh, was it really that bad?" Some movies don't that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
Like some movies he rips to shreds and years later people are like, "Yeah, no, that was utter dog shit." Like
yeah. As someone who's seen it, it's one of those
yeah.
movies. It's like Megamind 2 bad.
Oh.
That's how what we're talking about.
Ample timing, Megamind too.
Exactly. Had to mention a recent movie that
Yeah.
came out.
A brand new low. I haven't seen Doom Syndicate. Not yet, Minion. Not yet.
I have, unfortunately.
Ugh.
Stuck in a life out of me.
Yeah. So, well, is there anything else you have to say about Secret of Nim? Again, like I said, people are going to be talking about this movie for years and years to come. Like, this is not the end of our Secret of Nim
Yeah,
discussion, I'm sure. I'm sure years down the line we'll have something new to say, but anything for now?
right. Uh, I think I'm good for now.
Hmm.
The only thing I would mention is just the sequel book, mostly because how it's a much better sequel compared to the movie that I mentioned. But
Hmm.
it's mostly like a Lion King 2 kind of plot, but it's honestly not bad from
Okay.
reading it.
Interesting. A
Yeah.
Lion King 2 plot.
Although the original author's daughter wrote the book because he died before he could write a sequel, so
Okay. Interesting, actually. Well, before we get into the other movie, to wrap up this discussion of Secret of Nim, as I said, I have it on DVD. I have it with it's an MGM DVD from the late '90s, early 2000s. It comes with this neat paper booklet. It is a DVD, but like I said, it's like early 2000s, late 90s. Like I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s DVDs are really cool because you get the really cool menus. You get uh I don't know, just the structure of the case itself is a lot better than like what they would eventually become. As I've said, like one of my least favorite cases a movie can come in is one with that has like the recycling logo etched out or like it's just flimsy and
yeah.
just it could easily break. Like yeah, no, it's I hate DVDs like that. I just also want to mention for some reason, I don't remember where I got this DVD. Maybe this is from Bullmoose, and I don't remember. But on the actual disc, there's like these letters written in Sharpie. And from what I can decipher, I think it says KSTG, and I don't know what that means. So there's a new mystery
No
for
idea.
you.
I guess I'll figure that one out once the episode comes out. So
I guess so. Well, anyway, suffice it to say, I'm keeping this DVD. I could upgrade it to Blu-ray, but I really love how this DVD is packaged and what it looks like. I love the cover. It's very nice. But yeah, this is definitely a movie I'm fine with keeping on DVD. Do you have it on physical?
yes, I do. I have it on Blu-ray, although unfortunately it's one of those flimsy, as you said, those recyclable ones. So yeah.
Ugh. Well, you know what? What's important is the actual film on the disc, which, let's be real, it's pretty good for what we've said. So
Yeah,
I think that's fine. So,
mm-hmm.
But yeah, Secret of NIMH. It's no secret that it's good. How about that? That's how we'll end it.
Yeah, that's good enough.
So let's move on to the second movie. If you want.
Sure.
All right.
I guess since Jerry Goldsmith did the score for this movie, let's go to another one where he did another score for it.
Yeah, that being Total Recall. Yeah, I feel like we were gonna do a different Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, which is True Lies, but we'll save that for another day. I'm glad. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad you recommended Total Recall because this is a movie I definitely needed to watch for the first time because this is a Blu-ray I've had in the collection a while, but I had never seen the movie. I again watched the Nostalgia Critic review on it, but this was like years ago. Like I genuinely don't remember the last time I had watched it up until the past week or so. I rewatched it.
Right.
But I finally watched the movie for itself. I did not remember a thing from the review, so I watched it. I was semi-blind, and holy shit, dude! Like, wow, I love this movie. Like, it was really good. So, just a little thing I want to mention before. It's directed by Paul Verhoeven, who listeners will remember this is technically the second Paul Verhoeven movie we've talked about on the podcast, and the first one was not RoboCop. So I'd love to talk about RoboCop someday because that's probably my favorite Verhoeven film, but not yet, Minion, not yet. No, the first one everyone remembers was Showgirls. So
I'd call that a massive upgrade.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you recommended Total Recall so we could watch a real Paul Verhoeven movie. So, guess what? Controversial opinion. Total Recall is better than Showgirls. So,
yeah.
Well, Slice, what'd you think of Total Recall?
I will admit my story of finding this movie isn't as interesting as Secret of NIMH, but it was more of, hey, my friend recommended me this movie, and I watched it, and kicks ass.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I have more to say about it as opposed to just that. Just wanted to go for a general sum up.
So. No, of course. You wanted to start things off. Yeah, no, it like Secret of NIMH, this is not something I grew up with. In fact, like I just said, this is the first time I've ever seen this movie officially. But yeah, no, it was really good. Like it's definitely a film from a bygone era where like you can have this like super smart film disguised as a schlocky action blockbuster, you know, like and that's what Verhoeven at his best is. That's why I love the original RoboCop. Like I genuinely consider like the original RoboCop is what I would consider to be like one of those perfect films because it's such a perfect action movie and a perfectly smart and nuanced film as well. And that's why I feel like if I were to compare RoboCop to Total Recall, I do prefer RoboCop. Like I feel like even though I really liked Total Recall, I feel like going forward, I'm just always going to prefer RoboCop because I grew up with that movie a little more. I got a little more something out of it. But I still think that does not take away from Total Recall. Like Total Recall has, much like Secret of NIMH, a lot of layers to it to peel back and to just always think about. Like,
Yeah.
it really is interesting how not similar these two movies are, but also how very similar these two movies are.
Yeah.
Um, so let me just say, like, Arnold is not. I feel like we have talked about Arnold movies on this podcast, like, because I did talk about the Predator series, like
Yeah.
a couple years back. But I feel like this is a very unique Arnold film for sure,
Mm-hmm.
because when you think Arnold, you think Terminator, and I mean, I also think Mr. Freeze. But you think like these big bombastic characters in these like big action movies. You don't often associate Arnold with smart movies. And
Yeah.
not to diss Terminator. Like, the first two Terminator movies are obviously very smart. They eventually got dumb, but that's not because of Arnold. That's because of everybody else involved.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
but that's what I'm saying, is like Arnold is not like, he's very much a Hollywood like actor. Like, he is very much, you go and watch a Schwarzenegger film to see a hardcore action flick. Like, that's his bread
Yeah.
and butter, which is completely valid. Like, I don't want to necessarily, diss all those other Arnold films before Total Recall. Like, I'm sure there are those ones that actually were genuinely intelligent for what they are. I'm just saying, when it comes to Arnold films, you don't associate a film about a guy who realizes his life may all be a lie as an Arnold centric film. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
feel like, well, actually, in development, when this movie was getting developed, they were originally gonna have like Richard Dreyfuss as the main lead.
I do
And
remember hearing about
honestly,
that. Yeah.
yeah, this was also before they had Paul Verhoeven as the director. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this film was like in development hell.
Mm.
Honestly, I actually I'm actually fine with the movie the way it is, because
Yes.
I've heard this movie is going to be very similar to kind of like Blade Runner, more of a serious sci-fi flick,
Mm-hmm.
which, yeah, I honestly like comparing this movie at least to Blade Runner in particular, mostly because both source materials came from the exact same author.
Philip K.
This one
Dick.
is a short, yeah, this one's a short story called, I can remember wholesale. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but
It's a very bulky title. That's just
yeah,
it's interesting, but it's stupid. It's just like,
yeah.
don't call your movies that.
Yeah, it also has similar themes in a way, but of course, both movies take a different approach.
Oh
Blade
yeah.
Runner is a lot more serious and a lot
Yeah.
more, I guess, slower and introspective,
Mm-hmm.
while this movie is a lot more like a bombastic action flick, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I like that it's not like a complete ripoff of like Blade Runner, or it's not like it's trying to emulate. It's trying to be its own separate thing as opposed to trying to be the exact same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's actually kind of funny that, like, yeah, Blade Runner is definitely the slower, methodical movie. And even though I'm a huge fan of like bombastic, like, you'd think I would prefer
Yeah,
the bombastic and weirdo film over the slow, methodical film, but Blade Runner is one of my all-time favorite films ever. And so yeah, I do
right.
prefer Blade Runner. But again, they're going for completely different things. I get something more out of Blade Runner for personal reasons. I still get something out of Total Recall for other reasons. It's just, it's a film I just watched for the first time like a week or so ago. Like, I'm
Yeah,
still learning new things about it, and I'm sure upon rewatch I'll learn even more new things about it. But even still, from what I've seen, it's spectacular. Um
yeah,
yeah, no, just the way the world, and I because I feel like it is similar to like stuff like Blade Runner, um where it is like and it is similar to RoboCop because of the whole Paul Verhoeven connection. The fact that it is like this kind of like future that's really nihilistic, like, because that's what Blade Runner is. But I feel like Blade Runner wears its
yeah,
nihilism on its sleeve, whereas the point of something like RoboCop or Total Recall is it's supposed to like kind of trick you, because RoboCop and Total Recall, when you look at them underneath the surface, are miserable. Like,
yeah.
they are miserable, but you
Hmm.
don't get that right off the bat. And I feel like that's how the movie tricks you, and ultimately is a little more nuanced in that way, and I kind of like that.
Right.
So yeah, the whole futuristic the whole futuristic setting of Total Recall is fascinating because in a way it did predict a lot of things that eventually became true, but it is also still dated enough that it's charming, that like
Yeah.
it's still its own world regardless of whether it got things correct or not.
Right. Actually, one big complaint at the time, at least some critics found, was Arnold Schwarzenegger's performance. Not that they hated it, but they thought the acting was above his capabilities. But honestly, I think he was honestly perfect for the role, since
Hmm.
he's this everyman sort of character, at least Douglas Quaid's character in particular.
Yeah, I mean,
So I think he honestly fits the bill.
it's gonna be a little difficult for Arnold to play the everyman.
Yeah.
But I feel like
I'm yeah, I mean,
what he's given works. Like
yeah,
I think it's still an entertaining Arnold performance. Like he gets some really fun sequences. Like the way where he's like watching Hauser on the laptop, and Hauser's like, "You are not you, you're me." And he's like, "No shit." It's like only
I
Arnold
mean,
could pull that.
Arnold's not really known for his acting.
No.
For me, he's one of my favorite actors, not because of in general, but because he's so entertaining. So
Absolutely. Oh
you'll get a
yeah.
lot of fun grunts from him or a lot of fun screams. So
Yeah. Oh, the funny faces. Like the faces where he's like in the
yeah,
chair and you can see like his
yeah.
entire teeth, and it's just he's just "Arr!" He's like making this really funny face. It's so absurd, but like again, only Arnold can do that.
Yeah,
Where like he can make that face, but then still you're still watching him and be like, "Oh, this is the coolest motherfucker ever." Like that
yeah.
takes talent. Like let's be real.
That does. One thing I also want to talk about is like the special effects or like
Mm,
the costume, that sort of thing.
dude.
This was like one of the last movies in an era before CGI, which I know The Abyss came out before that, which had CGI, but this is one of the very last movies to not feature CGI at all.
Well, it
And
does have
it's one
CGI
hell
because
of
it does have like the X-ray scene where like the skeletons are walking by, where people can like see like into the they can like view and like see any like concealed weapons that they have. Like that is CGI, the skeletons.
yeah,
You're right, because it is during that era where CGI was used more as a tool, not so much the effect. Yeah, no,
yeah,
you're right. You're
yeah,
right. Yeah,
exactly.
and even still, like the practical effects are some of the best I've ever seen, like in a movie. Like it's they're obviously effects. Like you can tell when it's not
Agree.
Arnold's face. Like Arnold cannot pop his eyes out like he does whenever you see him like on Mars, and he's like and he can't breathe in the Martian atmosphere,
Yeah,
and his eyes are bulging out. Like Arnold can't do that. The only actor that can do that is Nicolas Cage. Let's be real, because Nicolas Cage is
yeah, that's
yeah. But you can tell when it's like a rubber face, like when he's like pulling out the bug in his nose, and he's just like "Grr," and
yeah.
it's just like stretching out his nose. It's like you can tell, but
Hmm.
even though you can tell, you're still impressed. You're still just like, oh, like that's a really, really good effect, because the amount of detail on the face, and the amount of like the fact that like the movements are a little robotic, but it's still not uh focused on enough. Like the editing is a little quick, where like, upon first time watching it, you probably wouldn't have picked up on that.
Right.
Um
I guess also one scene that I like to bring up is also the woman with the or when Arnold dresses up as a woman. It doesn't sound as bad as you might think, at least
yeah.
to the audience. But or of course she goes crazy, and
Mhm.
then Arnold throws her head as a bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was unique. Like in any
that
other
was.
movie, it probably would have been just like him like sneaking around, like have a hood over his head, or like in a modern movie he'd have like a baseball cap and sunglasses, and it's just like, "Oh, I'm indiscreet." Whereas like no, they took the time to hire an actress who would stand out in a crowd, kind of, but you wouldn't really think about as being Arnold, but then enough where like you could just like she eventually just like takes off like her head, and it's just like, oh, it was Arnold the whole time. Like yeah, it's a little hard to explain, but like Yeah,
Yeah.
that is such, and then yeah, he just like throws her head, and the woman's just like, "Get ready for a surprise," and then it explodes. It's just like it's so out there, but like they took the time to create that, and it makes for a very memorable sequence. So I like that.
Mhm.
Um, when you said like the woman character, I thought you were going to talk about the three-titted lady.
Oh,
But
I was gonna bring that up as a random note,
okay.
mostly because this is one of 3 movies where I've seen a three-breasted lady.
Oh,
This,
what are the
8
other
Crazy
movies?
Nights. Oh, this, 8 Crazy Nights, and Star Trek 5. At least 2 of them would make sense because they're aliens. The other
That's
one is just a
right.
shitty Adam Sandler joke.
I completely forgot about the three-breasted woman in Eight Crazy Nights. And I also completely forgot about the three-breasted woman in Star Trek Five. But because you said there's a three-breasted woman in Star Trek Five, directed by William Shatner, now I 100% believe you that that actually happened because
Yeah,
William Shatner. So,
Vanessa.
uh, but yeah, no, yeah, no, I mean, that's one of the, like the most famous sequences is like the three-titted lady. It again, it did not have to be in the movie, but this is Paul Verhoeven we're talking about, director of Showgirls. He's
Yeah,
like,
and
no,
Basic
we
Instinct.
have to include it. We have to include the three-breasted woman. It's just like, yeah, okay, sure, Paul, like whatever.
Yeah, why not?
I'm not gonna disagree.
I normally don't like Sharon Stone, at least as an actress, but I actually really like her performance in the movie. As
I
at least this. S- Go on.
No, I'm just gonna say, like, I don't think I've seen Sharon Stone in enough movies to really have an opinion on her. Well, she was in Catwoman. She was awful in Catwoman, but who wasn't awful in Catwoman? so, so
Exactly.
that's not really her fault. But you know what? I
Yeah.
think I'm not gonna disagree though because I wouldn't really say I've seen Sharon Stone in anything where I'm like, oh, Sharon Stone, she saved the day. Like, oh, what a great performance. I'm just like, oh, Sharon Stone's in this. Okay. But yeah, I agree. I think for what she brings to the table, she's really good. Like, because like you
Yeah.
buy her as like this loving wife at the beginning, and then it like shifts, and she's just like, sorry, Quaid, your life's a lie. And you're just like, oh,
Hmm.
like it hurts.
Yeah, she goes back and forth constantly between loving wife and then to fuck you.
Yeah,
That's sort
murdering
of. Yeah,
psychopath.
exactly.
I agree. She works in the movie. Can we talk about Michael Ironside in the movie? Uh,
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah, I really like his character in this. Maybe that's just because Michael Ironside. What a cool ass fucking actor name, first of all. But second of
I
all,
know. I wish
he's
I had that
he
name.
still works in the movie though because he just has this like really threatening presence, and I like how when it gets to like the third act and it's ultimately revealed that he was really just a pawn in the game of that Cohagen was like running, like he did
Right.
not matter. And I feel like in a much I, I feel like in a more confusing movie they probably would have played into that where like he becomes like a redeemed hero in the end, but I feel like having him be a lackey for the villain and even though the villain insults him to his face and he's still the villain's lackey, I feel like that in and of itself is such an interesting character move.
Yeah, that is.
um but like yeah, he's like such a threatening guy because he has like a very distinct face and like a very distinct like cold-hearted look to him. Like this is why he played
Right.
like the villain in Scanners, like because he just has that look to him. But yeah, no, and I like, even though like because he's kind of a dumbass by the third act, or you're just or like the Ronnie Cox's Cohagen's just like you're fucking idiot, like you're messing up, you almost ruined my plan. Which I don't know, I
Oh,
just think that's interesting that like they really play into that, without going too far that he becomes ultimately a joke. He's still a threat. It's a very
yeah.
unique balance that I think the movie pulls off, and I'm really impressed that it does.
Hmm. I guess I should also ask one major question from the movie. Is the movie a dream or not? Since that's the big theory on this
Well,
movie.
so I remember when I watched the Nostalgia Critic review years ago, like, it didn't really click with me that that's what the movie was going for. Like, that it was like, interpretable. Like I was just like, oh, that's weird that they're bringing this up. But after watching the movie, I can see what people are thinking about with it being interpretable. Like, is
Yeah.
Douglas Quaid, is he actually a secret agent with the mind of Hauser somewhere in his mind, or is this all a dream and it's just part of the simulation? Um,
Yeah.
Honestly, so I feel like with several movies I've talked about on this podcast, I ultimately go for the it was a dream the whole time theory when it comes to certain movies, like The Shining. That's
Right.
I've said that, or The Lighthouse. I've said that with, and I was almost willing to just be like, no, this all actually happened. But the more I think about it, the more I'm just gonna have to side with the dream theory. Like, I know I always fall back on the dream theory with movies, but honestly, through thinking about it, I feel like I have enough evidence to really think about that. But not to say that the evidence saying that it actually all does happen is not warranted. I just think because this is Paul Verhoeven, because this is because, and also because of the third act. The reason I say because of Paul Verhoeven is because, again, he's a very nihilistic director when you get down to it. Like, his movies look like fun and poppy, but they're miserable when you get down to it. And I feel like the most miserable
Yeah.
ending would be that it was all a dream and that Douglas fucking dies at the end. So, um, but I think the reason I also subscribe to it being a dream is because some wacky fucking shit happens in this movie. Like, especially the third act with the whole Mars getting an atmosphere. Now, there's
Yeah.
science to back up the fact that, it's all bullshit, that, like, the whole the whole center of Mars being water, and then, like, you just, like, make it a gas, and that all of a sudden is air. Like, that's bullshit. But the part that
Yeah.
got me was like, okay, they're terraforming Mars to have an Earth-like atmosphere. Let's, for the sake of argument, say that that's what happens. It's like, okay, fine. The ice becomes air, whatever. The fact that a brand new atmosphere completely covers the whole Earth and nobody dies, I'm like, it's a shift in pressure and atmosphere. People would be fucking crushed because they changed the atmosphere of a planet. Nobody would be alive. Everybody would die. But no, Arnold and fucking was it oh, what's the chick's name?
Millennia.
Melina. Sorry, I can't believe I forgot that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they're just like they're like struggling to breathe just enough that when the air comes, they are normal and it's fine. It's just like,
Yeah.
no, that's not how that
Yeah.
works. They would be dead. They would be pancakes. And I feel like, and this is just a personal thing, but like, because I've been kind of dune brained the past couple of weeks, the whole terraforming a desert planet, doesn't sit right with me, because in Dune, that's not a good thing. Like, that's the point of Dune, is that, like, in like the later sequel books, like, Dune becomes like a flourishing paradise. It's no longer a desert. And it's like, no, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. Whereas, like, here, they're just like, yay, Mars is breathable. It's just like, yay. Like, I don't know. That again, personal thing. But again, the whole changing an atmosphere, I was like watching it and I'm just like, yeah, no. This is too far. But that leads credence into, well, it was all a dream. Douglas doesn't know any better. Different Martian air now. It's like, okay, I saved the day, hooray! But not really. I was all a dream. So, sorry, I've been rambling. What is your theory?
Well, that's pretty much the only theory that I have, but I do subscribe to it, mostly because, well, earlier in the film, I know that I forgot which character it is, but they basically describe the climax of the movie. People are getting killed at you left and right. You meet this beautiful exotic woman, but I assure you, when this trip is over, you get the girl, kill the bad guy, and save the entire planet.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically describe the third act.
Yeah. So that's the Dr. Bob, I think. I really like that character. Like, this is really random, but like, I don't know, that actor just has this really specific like shit-eating grin that I kind of love, because he's just like, he's like he's like this doctor, quote unquote, but he's like selling him, it's like he's selling him car insurance, where he's just like, yeah, like, he just has this like
Right.
douchebag shit-eating grin to him that I kind of love. Like, he just has such a punchable face that I think it's just so good. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. He describes pretty much the movie to Arnold.
Yeah. Also, early in the movie, we technically see Melina, at least mostly because Arnold's trying to describe the perfect woman, at least for when he's trying to go get lobotomized or whatever it
Right.
was. And then it pretty much just shows Melina, at least early in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you see her later, and you're like, oh, it's that chick from earlier.
Yeah. Even though
Yeah.
he did imagine her in the dream he had before he went to recall, but again,
Yeah.
it's never explained, so you can interpret it however you want. Um,
Hmm.
Another thing I wanted to mention, I didn't mention this earlier, but like when he goes to recall and he sees like the secretary and she's just like applying nail polish, but it's like digital nail polish. That was a
Oh,
really
yeah.
cool scene, because I was just like, how did they do that? Like that's one of
I
those
don't know.
effects where like I was floored. Like, it's one of those little effects things that, like, didn't need to be in the movie, but you just look at it, you're just like thinking about it like days later, like, how did they do that?
Right. Actually, this movie kind of had some influence, at least for future sci-fi movies. The
Mhm.
biggest example that I can think of is the red pill, obviously, Matrix.
When I saw the red pill, I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the red pill and I'm just like, oh, god damn it. But it was 10 years before the Matrix, so I was like, all right. But
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit. Like, no fucking way. um but even still, like, there's some stuff this movie pulls that, yes, would influence, but I feel like it does pull some stuff that you never see anymore. Like, one thing I
Right.
was kind of like horrified by was, I'm not gonna say like I'm a prude that like hates violence. I mean, if you've heard the movies I've talked about on the podcast, like, I am very much a psychopath when it comes to some movies. But just watching this movie, because like some of the actions, like, yes, there's a lot of blood squibs, but the actions that cause those blood squibs kind of shocked me. Because like the one scene that like really stuck with me a lot was the escalator scene, where like Arnold's like running up an escalator surrounded by, commuters and just random people on the escalator, and like Michael Ironside and all his hired goons are like shooting at Arnold, and like one guy gets like hit in the crossfire and you see like his like chest explode. And so then Arnold like
Mhm.
holds up that guy and uses him as a human shield. And I was like horrified by that. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, this is the hero of the movie, and he's using a random citizen that just got hit with the crossfire as a human shield, and then just tosses him off to the side like a crumpled up piece
On
of paper. I was like,
on
whoa.
on that note, I remember watching the Red Letter Media review of this movie,
I've seen it too, yeah.
and I remember one. I forgot which one, but they were pretty much horrified at how violent it was when they were kids.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm watching
but
this at 25 years old, and I'm horrified by it, because I was like, Jesus Christ. Like, you would
yeah,
never, ever see that in a modern movie. Well, what's interesting, though,
no,
is because, in modern, like, MCU films, like, a lot of the carnage is off screen and implied when you see, like, buildings being
yeah,
destroyed, but then it's never really talked about. Rightfully so, because, that's not what the movie's about, unless the movie decides to be about that, and yet it'll still show it, but
right,
whatever. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, just like something about that was like so specific. How like, and like even later on, like when Arnold finally gets to Mars and like he shoots like a window and it explodes, and like innocent people start like flying out the window, and he gives it no second thought. I'm just like, this guy's an asshole. But like, I kind of like that the movie goes that far without
yeah,
really diving into it, Like, it kind of adds
hmm
another layer of like cynicism to this character and to
right.
this movie. but yeah, no, that it was just so fascinating to see that, like, your main character hero in a mainstream Hollywood blockbuster uses an innocent man as a human shield who just explodes into a pile of blood and guts. Did not expect to see it in a movie like this, but I'm glad that I saw it in a movie like this. Though, then again, thinking back to it, it's a Paul Verhoeven movie. Of course, there is a scene like that in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, same guy who directed Starship Troopers, so
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
There's the other scene I want to talk about because Red Letter Media brought this up, but I remember pointing it out when I watched it the first time before I watched the Red Letter Media video that I feel like I wrote this down.
Mhm.
I can't find it in my notes, but like um when Arnold like sees when Arnold is like uh he like sees the guy give him the briefcase, and like he walks down the stairs to the payphone where the briefcase is, and like some random woman is there and she picks it up and Arnold's like, no, that's mine, and the woman's just like, I don't see your name on it, and he's just like, no, I need it, and he just walks away with it, and she goes, fuck you, you asshole, and Arnold just turns around and bows. Which I thought was so funny. Like I
I
was
don't
like,
remember.
oh my god, it's so funny because it's so random, but it's like so hilariously petty of Arnold to do that, because in any other movie he would just be like, "Ah, you got the briefcase," but like you have this interaction with this random woman, and it's so memorable because it's so random how she's just like, "Fuck
Yeah.
you, you asshole." It's like, lady, how do you know that's not his briefcase? Like you're just some stranger. And then Arnold just bows to be like, "Yeah, I am an asshole. Fuck off." Like it's oh god, I just love that. I love it so much. And another, I just remembered this other part. I actually, yeah, I found it. So during the climax where he and Melina are like shooting up the bad guys, and he actually uses the hologram that they had like
Yeah.
hinted at earlier. And I love how, like, he uses it a couple of times, and then he like walks up and he's like sneaking through like the reactors, and like he has a gun and he finds a couple more soldiers, and he's like, "You think this is the real Quaid?" And they at first are like a split second are like, "Huh?" He's like, "Well, it is," and then he just shoots them. I was like, "Oh, that's so funny!" Like just the way he says it, like, "You think it's the real Quaid? It is."
This
Like
movie's so quotable for
it's
me.
so quotable and so hilarious. Like it's hilarious in
Yeah.
its brutality. Like I respect the hell out of that. That is so much fun. It's so memorable too. Like these scenes are so funny because of
Yeah.
how like memorable they are. Like the fact that I
Or
remember
e
them a week later is like a testament to how fun they are.
or even the scene where Arnold shoots his quote unquote wife and he says, "Consider it a divorce."
Consider it a divorce. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this movie's not afraid to have a sense of humor to it, and I'm glad
Yeah.
because it makes it a lot
Okay,
more
well.
fun. Like, and it doesn't take away from the whole like interpretable aspect. Like, I feel like movies are a little afraid sometimes to have those fun moments to show off its sense of humor, because then it feels like, oh, it's just a dumb popcorn movie. Like a line as stupid as "consider this a divorce," you'd think like, oh, that doesn't come from a smart movie, but it does.
Yeah,
You know,
it
because I feel
does.
like the movie trusts its audience, much like Secret of Nim trusts the children. Like, this movie trusts its audience where it's like you can still enjoy it as a fun, dumb action film, but there's still that meat to chew on underneath. Like there's still something to interpret here. Like it's not entirely throwaway. Like there's something to it.
Hmm.
Yeah, is there anything else to talk about with the movie itself?
I guess there's one more thing I want to mention.
Please.
Mostly because after the movie, they wanted to make a sequel to this movie. Well, I guess it's more of a fun fact, but of course they canceled a sequel for this movie, and
Because where do you go?
the sequel. Yeah, exactly. And eventually, Steven Spielberg picked up the project, and made Minority Report, which of course he made it his own standalone movie as opposed to a sequel to Total Recall.
Well, is Minority Report like is that based off of a short story as well from Philip K. Dick, or am I?
It is based off of it's based off a short story by him, but it was Total Recall was supposed to be a sequel, but Spielberg picked up kind of the project and made his own standalone thing.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because I know there's like I feel like there is like a Total Recall sequel-ish because like I feel like they did mention it on the Red Letter Media video because and I'm not just talking about like the reboot that they made in 2012. I'm talking about like they actually talked about like this like late 90s thing, and I feel like the only reason I remember that is because I'm like 90% sure I have that movie somewhere in my collection. Hold on a second. Let me just
you're good.
Let me just see if I can like find the actual DVD. Oh shit, I just first DVD I pull out. So, listeners who know, like, the setup I have is I have all my movies like behind my laptop right now. I just have like this gigantic pile of DVDs and Blu-rays that have yet to be talked about. The movies that I have yet to talk about I have behind my laptop. People can see it like during episodes when I have like the DVDs and Blu-rays like in front of some of them. Anyway, basically what I'm trying to say is I have this 12 action films DVD. I have several of these like DVD collections of films, and yeah, this one has like movies like Equilibrium and The Faculty and The Prophecy, and like you start to go down, and a lot of these don't sound like movies you probably ever heard of, like Renaissance Paris 2054 and 2012 Supernova. And so yeah, here it is: Total Recall 2070, Machine Dreams, 83 minutes, color, rated R for some violence, sexuality, and language, from the year 1999. I don't recognize any of these actors. But yeah, no.
I would.
Wow, I can't believe the first DVD I pulled out, because again, I have several of these like DVD collection DVDs, and like the first one, it just had it. So
right.
I've always wanted to do an episode on one of these, but again, like I said, 12 movies are in this box. Like that's asking a lot out of people. So
yeah, understandable.
But now that I found it, I really want to do it someday. But anyway, sorry. Apparently, I have Total Recall too. What do you know?
Apparently.
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna say it right now. I doubt it's as good as the original.
I doubt.
So
I mean, it might be better than the 2012 remake, but
I mean,
I don't know.
I that's another movie like I said with Secret of NIMH. I debated watching Secret of NIMH too, but I ultimately didn't. Same thing. I sort of debated watching the 2012 one, but we're not talking about it in any way.
Yeah.
So like, I don't like watching movies unless I have an excuse to talk about them on the podcast. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it happens because like I've watched.
It's been a while.
Go ahead.
It's been a while since I've seen the 2012 Total Recall, but I don't remember it being that great. I remember it being kind of what I said earlier, how Total Recall was not trying to be a Blade Runner knockoff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this one, I remember it trying to be a Blade Runner knockoff, but it's been a while since I've seen it.
Right.
And I remember Josh Brolin being okay in the role.
Josh Brolin was in Total Recall?
Yeah, I think he was Dennis Quaid. So.
I thought it was Colin Farrell.
Or no, yeah, you're right, Colin Farrell.
Your names are all mixed up.
No,
that's okay. Look, me, I'm like, I obsess over like movie facts and stuff like this. So like I just like will just go through and just like look at Letterboxd, and I like, again, back in the day it was IMDb pages. Nowadays it's Letterboxd pages. I'll just like randomly go down a rabbit hole of just random fucking movies in their Letterboxd pages. It's bad, but I mean, I guess I saved your ass here because I said no, it's not Josh Brolin, it's Colin Farrell. So,
Yeah,
it's
luckily we won't be dating somebody who's like, it's Colin Farrell, idiot.
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, can I talk about this Blu-ray I have?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So, it is unfortunately a Blu-ray with the recycling logo etched out, but as much as I'd love to get rid of one of those, I kind of don't want to get rid of this Blu-ray for a couple of reasons. One, it's distributed by Lionsgate, so
Oh, fair reason.
so we love Lionsgate. Yeah, they made CIA. Everything they touch now, we just think is a meme. I love Lionsgate, just as a meme. But I really like how this Blu-ray is designed because you put it in and it does like the Lionsgate logo, like the spinning gears
Yeah.
and like this really interesting like clockwork. It's a really neat logo. So then it does the whole thing and then it opens up like a door and then it says like Lionsgate in like a cloudy area. But on this Blu-ray, so it goes through the Lionsgate logo and it eventually turns red. It turns red. And so then it like flies into like space or like it flies into the sky a little more. It's still red. And then like the menu pops up for the movie, which I thought was really cool that like it kind of like plays with like the logo into becoming the menu. We've talked about that on the podcast when me and Mordo did Panic Room. Mordo talked about the Panic Room special edition, how like it starts with like the Columbia TriStar logo and then it turns into a blueprint, which turns into the blueprint of the menu for that movie. Kind of same thing. It kind of goes into like the menu, but even still, it's not like the main menu. It's like a menu that says like Total Recall, but it gives you two options. It says go to menu or play movie, but it's a countdown. There's like a countdown timer that says like movie will play in like so and so minutes. So if you don't touch anything for like 10 seconds, it'll just automatically play the movie, but you get the option to either go to the menu or play the movie right away. Really interesting. Really cool. I must say, really cool Blu-ray.
Yeah.
So it, like I said, it does have the recycling logo etched out, but you know what? I think I'm still willing to keep it because of the strides it takes with on the Blu-ray to make it unique. So
right,
I'm gonna keep this. Maybe later down the line, maybe I'll upgrade it to like a 4K or something. But regardless, no matter what version I have it on, Total Recall belongs in the collection.
Fair enough.
Well, do you have it on physical? What's your story there?
I actually own it. Well, two of them. Well, I actually own two things from it. The 4K, and I actually got this VHS of it from my grandparents. Mostly because, well, when they died, we rummaged through their house. I saw this movie and another 1990 movie, Rescuers Down Under, and I was like, "Ooh, those are unique."
Another mouse movie, another connection.
Exactly. There was also a third movie, Belle's Magical, or no, not Belle's Magical, or Belle's Enchanted Christmas, but I didn't know anything.
Enchanted helicopter. Oh shit!
Yeah, I didn't know anything about the funny helicopter meme at that point, so I only grabbed those two because I'm nostalgic for Rescuers, and I was like, "Ooh, Total Recall! I've heard of that."
Nice.
So yeah, I'm proud to have this on
the occasional VHS tape. Yeah,
exactly.
Nice. That's awesome, dude. I love that. That's awesome. Oh, I'm so glad that other people have VHS tapes. It's not just me.
Don't worry, I have a VHS player, so
good. Yeah,
you're not the only one.
No, that's good. I mean, they're a lot harder to find nowadays. Rightfully so. Again, VHS, terrible quality. I get why people, completely drop VHS tapes for DVDs, and why Blu-rays and 4Ks, while popular, have not entirely killed off DVDs. But there's just something about the VHS aesthetic that I don't want to let go of. Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet, Minion.
Yeah, for me, I like collecting it VHSs mostly because of as you said, the quality, and B, for nostalgia purposes. So.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the aesthetic I love. I think it's fascinating. So, that's awesome. Total Recall on the occasion of VHS.
And I guess also the commercials that come with it, which I find kind of nostalgic too.
Yeah, I really like, like I've said this before, but like, when I think back on like Thomas and the Magic Railroad, I also associate like the commercials that would play before the movie. And yeah, like the Disney trailers that would play, like those were a lot of fun to watch. Yeah, no, I agree. Like sometimes VHS commercials, like again, they're just they have like a bit of nostalgia. We have a bit of nostalgia for them on their own, like regardless of what movie they're attached to.
Right.
It's part of the movie watching experience for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd say that's pretty successful episode there. Both really good movies, both keeping both movies because they're really good films. So Slice, dude, I guess that just about does it. But could you please shout out your stuff? Where can people find you?
Well, I have this YouTube channel that's essentially my name. Although I haven't posted any videos yet, I probably might in the future. I don't know when. Probably when I get an editing software or some shit like that. I have a Twitter or X account, which I never use.
Good.
And I have a Letterboxd that I do use, however.
Nice. Yeah. All your links will be in the description below. For sure. But yeah, dude, thank you for coming on to talk about Secret of NIMH and Total Recall. Like, again, Secret of NIMH is a movie I've owned for years. I'm glad I can finally cement the idea of me keeping it. And Total Recall, like I've said, like, that was a Blu-ray that I had, but I had never seen the movie. So like, it's making up this wall behind my laptop of just movies I own, but I've never seen. And like, that's what this podcast was made for, was movies like this. So glad to finally have it, and I'm glad to have finally seen it because it's so fucking good. So it really helps. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So
yeah, and thank you, the listener, for listening to today's podcast. If you want to support the show, big if, give a like, give a comment, listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. That's fine too. Doesn't matter. But yeah, thanks for watching, and now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to be waking up from, because this was all a dream, this episode. This all never happened, actually, so I'm going to be waking up soon. So
yeah, I don't exist, by the
way. All right, bye-bye, everybody. Just